Welcome, Global Educators. I'm Baika, your host with a brand new episode. This show is for parents and educators and parents from all around the world to come together and talk about how to create a safe environment and a world for the next generation. Today's episode is called Self Architect. Our speaker today, his name is Michael Wish. He's an educator, founder, and a Marine officer, here to discuss all about self help, self improvement for teenagers and young adults. First of all, thank you for accepting my invitation coming up on our show. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you for having me. So I'm Michael Wish. As you said, I'm an educator, tutor, Marine Corps officer, and I founded my company, Vele Logos. It's a student development company, and we focus on helping students take control of their learning and their habits and their future. And I've spent over a decade mentoring students, and I believe deeply in the power of coaching, systems, and personal transformation through intentional growth.
As our name is self-architect, what made you, or what motivated you to come up with this term for your course?
Well, it sounds cooler than self-help. So at least we'll wanted to start with something that sounded interesting. But, the idea is that I'll tell a short story is that I was playing a new board game with a friend the other night and he was explaining the rules to me. And it really frustrated me because he didn't start with the goal. He didn't start with what do I need to do to win and then how do I earn those points to win. He started with game mechanics, and I feel like a lot of students run into this where they're given tips and tricks and help, and all of those things are wonderful, but you can't start unless you have an end state and a vision for your kind of your future self. And then you have to build everything up to that point, right? You have to have an end state and a goal in mind. So for me, building something or architecting, right? That's not a verb, but that's where the name kind of came from, was we want to create a whole picture and we want to create all the steps along the way. And that's kind of how we came up with the name for the self-architect course.
Let's talk about your company. What motivated you to start your own business?
So I was a tutor for a long time during COVID. I tutored STEM courses, physics, math, and coding. And kind of as COVID stopped, I started tutoring a little bit less, but I kept a core of 7 or 8 students. And we ended up working together for several years, kind of through high school and into college. And as we had been working together for so long, at some point the questions were a lot less about the school topics and a lot more about life. How much should I work out? How should I study? I feel like I'm studying, but I'm not getting the results that I want. Or other people seem to be doing things that are more efficient somehow. And and it wasn't just school either. I mean, it was life. It was, again, how to work out. How much sleep should I get? What am I doing with my life? And so I really enjoyed having those discussions and conversations and getting closer with those students and working through a lot of those additional problems. And so that's the reason for starting the education company, was to coach and help students in all of the different areas that are important to them besides specific academic subjects. And I really feel like there are a lot of coaches in the world. We have coaches for sports, we have coaches for business, right? There's lots of coaches, except we don't really have coaches for students. And that is, kind of your late teen years, early adult years are some of the most important years of your life because you're learning and you're trying to figure out who you are. And I think that's the most vital time in someone's life to have a coach. And so I wanted to find a way to help kids and fill that role.
As an educational advocate, I'm extremely excited about your educational company, and I support more and more educational companies that hope that they will all come together and create a better place for the next generation and actually assist them. We will never have too many coaches, you know what I mean? So like we won't have never have too many people here on this earth helping the youth. Let's talk about self-architect. So in your
Mhm.
definition, what are the core concepts or values of someone who is working on themselves?
Yeah, so it starts with number one, to be aggressively curious, and number two, to experiment joyfully. So those are the values of the education company as a whole, not specifically for the self-architect course, but I find that they work wonderfully when you're trying to work on yourself. Working on yourself is really, really hard, and that's why most people struggle. Most people fail at least at some point in their lives in trying to make meaningful improvements. And I think that's because we take ourselves too seriously. So I want people to be aggressively curious about themselves. And I think that makes it easier when you do struggle, when you try to lose weight and you don't. You can experiment with different things. You can just be aggressively curious about what works and what doesn't, and it makes it a lot easier to work through that process. As far as the course specifically goes, the kind of the main tenets are number one, that we need to establish that goal, right? That's the goal at the board game, that's the goal of the sports game, and you need to figure out what the goal is of your life, which is really just it's a future vision and identity for yourself. So the question I ask most teens get asked is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And your job is really important. Don't get me wrong, but it's probably going to change a million times. Your mind is going to change about your job, and then your actual job will probably change. And, the truth is, most people don't end up doing what they thought they would do, right? I meet an insurance broker, and I don't think the teenage version of themselves was hoping to be an insurance broker one day. But hopefully, you do have an idea of what kind of person you want to be in 15 or 20 years. And I think it's really important to start from that place there and have a sense for, is this person giving? This person is a pillar of their community. This person's a great mom or a great dad. And I really want you to almost engage with that version of yourself 20 years from now as if they're a different person. And your job then is to figure out, with my help if you need it, is how do I get from here to there, right? I want to be that person. I'm not that person today. And so step two is to identify the gaps between who you are now and who you want to be. And don't be afraid to identify those gaps. This can be a painful step as people walk through and realize that they're not who they want to be and they're not living the life that they plan on living, or at least that they don't have the habits that that person should have kind of in the future. And it can be difficult, but I think if you just take a step and realize that you have decades to solve this problem, it makes that problem much more manageable. And then the next step is to actually build the habit. So you actually have to take action. And the good news is you have, as well, this is what I like working with teens. They feel like their whole life is in front of them. When you work with adults, I got to figure all this out today because I'm already 30 something and I've already missed so much. But teens have their whole life in front of them. So we really want to build habits today. James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, is a wonderful venue for being able to actually implement really good habits. And what I do, or at least my role, is helping them figure out what those habits should be. And then the last step is accountability. We all hold each other accountable. It's a strong, supportive community. Obviously, I can hold people accountable, but usually it's the students that are doing it for each other. And that's a really strong, important part of what we do.
I like all four. First one, be aggressively curious. Number two, identify the gap. Number three, build a habit. Three, accountability. I do want to talk about identifying the gaps. And you
Yeah.
talked about how it's going to be painful. Do you help
Yes.
students with struggles? And what are like the common struggles that teenagers face these days?
Yeah, I'll tell you a story of a young lady that I worked with. I guess it was a year ago now, and she was very capable. So, we have a lot of students that are struggling and they're not sure why. We also get a lot of students that are doing great, but they're very stressed or they're having a hard time keeping up with everything, or they feel like they're in a rat race and they don't know why they're doing what they're doing. I worked with this young lady. Her name was Megan, and she was very accomplished. She was in high school and she was trying to get into an Ivy League school. And she had a mentor. This was a company that her parents had hired to make sure that she does all the things that she needs to do to get into Harvard or whatever she was trying to get into. And I was just her math tutor. But I could tell one night when we were working together that she was not paying attention. We'd been working for 20, 25 minutes. She was just asking questions in the middle of my explanations. She was not in the zone and paying attention. And so I just kind of stopped everything and I asked her what was going on. And so she said that she was just very, very stressed and she was having trouble focusing and she was having trouble keeping up with everything. So we started going through the list of things that she was doing. And she was involved in so many activities because she's trying to pad the resume to get into school that she was absolutely wiped. And so we went through and, we needed to identify the gap. And the gap in this case was maybe her ability to handle stress and her ability to say no to things because everything that her mentor was telling her to do, she was doing. And we went through and one of those activities was running a study hall from 8 to 11 p.m. 3 times a week. And we sat through and said, this is not going to be the thing that gets you into Harvard, I promise, right? And yet it was stealing her sleep. She wasn't actually able to study while she was running it because kids were asking where the bathroom was. Is there a vending machine nearby? They needed help because she's smart and she's there, and it was taking away from her sleep. And so we worked for a while for her to gain the confidence and the disagreeability to say, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. This isn't helping me. I need to refocus, and I need to be better at the other things I'm doing and do one less thing. So that was difficult for her. It was not easy for her to tell her parents and to tell her mentor that she did not want to do something that they all had at some point gotten together and decided was a good idea. But she was able to do it, and because she had great reasons, right? She was losing sleep. She wasn't actually getting any study time during this. And that line item on her resume was not going to be the deal breaker. And so I think she was able to successfully stop doing the study hall, and things improved after that. Just taking that one thing off her list relieved a huge amount of stress for her.
Yes, I love that. Not just a math teacher, but you also care about their social emotional well-being. I love that.
Thank you.
And would you say you had that same type of support in when you were in high school?
No, I mean, my parents so I was not a great kid in high school. I mean, I did okay and I went to school, but I did not put effort into classes that I didn't care about. So I was good at math and I was good at science. And so I did those and I just showed up to everything else. And, it's one of those things in life where you look back and you just want to shake that idiot 17-year-old version of yourself and say, because now I love school and I love learning and I like history and I write and I'm a totally different person. So, for me, it's so funny. I work with all these kids and 90% of them are just better humans than I was. Actually, 100% of them are better. So for me, it took a lot longer to figure out who I was. It took a lot longer, a lot more failures and struggles to figure out for me that school is important, that learning was important, and that development was important. So,
Would you say this generation has way more tools when it comes to social emotional well-being compared to the, let's say, older generation, 50, maybe 30 years ago?
oh, of course. I mean, I have 30 students in my community, and I think only two or three of them live near me. So, one, the obviously the internet, the ability to just meet with really great and amazing people from all over the country, and it's nice because they don't know the students in there, and that anonymity sometimes is helpful, right? If I get a bunch of students who are in the same class together, so like if I go visit a high school and talk with a class, they're silent. They don't say anything. It's, maybe there's some awkwardness to it because they're surrounded by their friends and people they know. And for some reason, they're hesitant to engage in what we're speaking about. But if I get a bunch of random high school kids together on online in a Zoom room, well, there's some anonymity there. I don't know these guys. They don't know me. And suddenly people are a little bit more free to just express themselves and try to work through some of these things. So that's one huge advantage. Another is AI. AI is exploding, and I think that's some people will try to make the claim that it's going to radically transform education. I don't think that's the case. That's been made before in a lot of different ways. And in the end, learning is always going to be a difficult process. It's always going to be uncomfortable. Actual learning, you're not going to be enjoying, right? It's hard work to learn and to learn something well, and that will never end. So I do think folks have to be taught how to use AI appropriately and to kind of maximize its effectiveness for each person. But I mean, that tool right there for $20 a month, as a ChatGPT subscription, for example, gives everyone in the world a decent tutor. And that's something obviously that nobody in history has ever had access to. And at this point, we just need to teach folks how to use it appropriately and efficiently.
Yes. So another thing, the third thing was building the habit. What are some suggestions for students who are struggling to build their habit?
So this is number one. If you have time, I recommend reading James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. This particular step, most of what I teach comes right from his work, which is amazing. And the short story, though, is that number one, it has to start with who you are. It has to start with an identity, not with the habit. So, for example, I work with some young men, and these young men typically, not always, but typically they want to get big in the gym, right? They want to lift and they want to be muscly and they want to be big. And the problem is that their approach is it starts with something like this. I'm a skinny guy and I want to be a big guy. And so I will go to the gym and I will lift. And the issue with that is if you start in a place of I'm a skinny guy that doesn't lift, that is how you're going to see yourself. And when it's hard, when the motivation is low, when it's early in the morning, it's going to be really difficult to go to the gym if you see yourself as a skinny guy that doesn't lift. And what you need to do is you need to sit down and you need to start with the goal, with the end state, and start with identity. And even though you might feel like you're lying to yourself, you need to say, I am a skinny guy that lifts, right? I am a lifter. That is what I do. That is who I am. And then going to the gym is a natural extension of who you are. It's not something you're trying to do. So you go to the gym and the second step to this, once you have the identity, once you have the vision is, and this is James Clear's kind of steps, is number one, make it easy. Like, don't try to radically transform your entire life overnight. The vast majority of people that do that fail. And it's really cool to see those success stories, which is why they're so popular online. You see someone that just totally changed their physique in a year, or maybe they had an addiction and they got over it. And now they run marathons, or you see these people that have these transformations, but they're exceedingly rare, right? I mean, this is someone who's winning the lottery in life, essentially. Most people make small little changes. And the good news is that small little changes compound massively over time. So if you make a 1% improvement a day, that's a 37 times improvement by the end of the year, right? For our math people out there, that's 1.01 to raise to the 365th power. So that's what I recommend. And that's the system that I ask is let's build a habit and let's start by making it really easy. You do not need to go lift big weights. You just need to show up at the gym and do a 5-minute workout 3, 4 times a week. Do that for several weeks or even several months. And I know like people are going to be listening and say, well, you're not going to be any bigger and you're not going to be any stronger. Well, I disagree. I think your technique will be really good. And I think you will be a little bit bigger and a little bit stronger. But more important than all of that is that you will have a very strong habit established in your life. And from there, you can actually start to progress and learn and push yourself a little bit because it's just who you are now and it's a habit that you have. So that's not the entire system, but that's essentially the approach that we have.
Perfect, amazing, thank you. Let's talk about number
Yeah.
4, which is accountability. You did talk about how students hold each other accountability, right? Peer-to-peer mentoring. Please give us more example about what that would look like.
Yeah. So we are terrible at holding ourselves accountable. We will absolutely let ourselves down in a heartbeat. So, I get a lot of students that will go into a semester and they'll set some very abstract goal of I want to do better in school, right? So there's already an issue there, which is it's not concrete enough, it's not actionable enough, but they'll this very noble effort to just do better in school. And then as soon as things get hard, right, we tell ourselves excuses. Well, I took harder classes than I thought, or I'm more tired. And you are very happy to let yourself down for whatever reason. But we have a really hard time letting other people down, right? We really don't want to let someone else down that is dependent on us. And so you'll see some kind of self-help advice say that you should treat yourself like a different person, right? Would you ever let someone else down in the way that you're letting yourself down? And while that's great advice, I find that people have a really hard time treating themselves like a different person. And so we do essentially two things that are slightly different. Number one is I don't want you to think of letting yourself down now. I want you to think of letting your future self down because your future self definitely is a different person. I'm not who I was 20 years ago. You won't be who you are now in 20 years. And so if you can imagine that person as really a different person, are you letting them down 20 years from now? And people tend to rise to the challenge a little bit more if they're trying to help themselves as a different person in the future. And that's a little abstract and it's a little strange. The second way that we do it is that we assign accountability partners amongst each other. And if you have someone, across the world or across the country that you're assigned to, one, again, it gives you that kind of anonymity. It's not somebody you know. This is why when you go see a therapist, you don't know the therapist, and oftentimes that helps a lot. And it's just someone that you can check in with every other day or every week or however often you'd like. And you're helping them with a habit and they're helping you with a habit. And I actually try to make sure they're different habits. I try not to assign two people that are working on the exact same thing, although that can work too. But I find if it's a different habit, they will often pick up each other's habit in some form, which is really great. That's a nice side benefit, right? And so they check in with each other, through messages and then we do weekly coaching calls as well, and that's really where the big accountability comes in. And again, everybody's very supportive. We'll have people that show up and say, "I totally failed. I didn't do my thing at all this week, and I'm feeling really bad about it," right? And I think, it's those moments where you need to see that other people fail too. Other really successful people have spent their life struggling and failing. Too often we see successful people online or in our lives and we think, well, they must have always had it together. They must have some secret sauce that I don't have or some natural ability. And that's really, it's not true. So I think it actually helps dispel, the fact that we're all human and we all make mistakes. It dispels those well, not rumors, but misconceptions, we'll say.
Why is it important for teenagers to be a part of some sort of community, whether it be academic or it can be sport or some sort of hobby, right? Why is it important for them to be part of a community? The reason why I asked this is I think because of the internet, a lot of people, or not just teenagers, even adults, are choosing the path to live an individualistic life, right? A lot of people choose to study alone. They could benefit from that. But I personally think there's a lot of downsides to isolating yourself, especially teenagers, because they're developing their identity. They haven't developed a strong prefrontal cortex yet. So specifically for teenagers, why is a community extremely important for them?
Well, three separate reasons. The first is because we're social animals, right? We really thrive in social environments, and we really thrive in communities where we feel a part of the group and valued and appreciated. I mean, that's why the worst criminals, it's still the worst punishment is isolation, right? Even for the worst people in the world in the hardest prisons, it's still the worst punishment could be being by yourself. So we're social animals, and we really want to be a part of communities. The second reason why it's so important, I think for teenagers is that I think no, it's not that anybody intentionally lied, but the hope was that social media would create that community, right? So as the online world came on and we kind of stopped hanging out with each other in person quite as much, and the thought was, well, we'll hang out with each other on social media. And that has failed, right? That promise doesn't work. So for various reasons that we won't get into here, but we don't get the community that we want through Facebook and the other social media platforms. So I think it's really important to take a step back and say, all right, we're social animals. We used to thrive extremely well in tribes of approximately 100 to 150 people. Okay. And by the way, that number shows up everywhere. Companies that are 150 people or less really thrive. As soon as you break that mark, they really start to struggle with organization. Social media, no matter how many friends you have on your social media, at most people only keep up with about 100 to 150 people throughout their lives. And so I think that there's something special about that number. It's about the most people that you can handle thinking about, throughout your time. And we have to find a way to build that again. I'm not claiming that what I'm doing will create the community or replace an in-person community. But what's really nice about what we're trying to build is that it's a community of like-minded people who want to improve themselves and want to try to do better in life and want to try to do better in school. And in real life, sometimes you don't get to pick everybody in your community, and you don't get to surround yourself with positive influences that are only good for you. You do get to do that here. And so I think that's what we're trying to build. It's not social media. It is online, but you are who you surround yourself by. And so just imagine if you could surround yourself by 10, 20, 30, 40 other people around the same age that all want to improve themselves, that are all trying to be better. And I think that has a huge impact on folks.
How about people who do not have any community or people who are not able to join a community? How can they help themselves and improve their self-improvement?
Yeah, so the first thing is to realize that everyone can do it on their own. And it's not easy. It's not easy doing it with other people, but there's been a plenty of successful folks who haven't had a big supportive community that are able to make meaningful changes in their lives. Number one is you do need some sort of system. I think my system is a good one. And on my website, which we'll talk about later, I do have free PDFs that will help you kind of guide through the process that I've made. And so you're welcome to take those and work through them on your own. I highly recommend that. Number two, when you're working on your own, as I'll go all the way back to kind of where we started, being aggressively curious and don't try really hard not to be judgmental about yourself, right? You're going to sit down, you're going to list out all these things that you want to work on. You're going to realize how imperfect you are, and it's okay. Just accept it. I want you to accept it almost as if it's a science experiment. And then again, experiment joyfully. Try some different things. And if you fail, write it down as if it's observations in the lab instead of judgments on who you are and what your capability is. I think too many people equate success and failure with winning and losing, and that's the wrong frame. The frame for me is success and failure are all about learning. Is that if you are successful, it just means you learned something in the past. And if you're failing, it just means you're learning right now. So there's going to be a process of learning, which is going to feel like failing. And when you're on your own, the more enjoyment that you can derive from those failures, as odd as that sounds, the higher your chance of success at the end of the process. So find a process. It doesn't have to be mine. It can be anyone's. Maybe read James Clear's book. It's a phenomenal book. And just try to change one small thing in your life. It could be drinking water every day, a little bit more. It could be going for a walk a couple of times a week, but just change one small thing because the benefits that will compound over the next 10, 15, 20 years are going to be huge, even if you don't see them in the short term. And try to have fun and try to enjoy it.
Thank you. I'll add all of the information in the description. Make sure to go check it out. And thank you, Mr. Michael. What is your last message to any teenagers and young adults that are listening right now?
My last message is that, first of all, thank you. You're probably a better human being than I was. I know I said this earlier, when I was your age. But even if you're not, right, wherever you are, I think the most important thing is to try to take a more long-term view of your life. And again, we go back to that game example. What is the goal? And most of the young folks that I work with, when I first ask them that question, they tell me, again, they tell me what they want to be. Well, my goal is to be a lawyer, or my goal is to be rich. And, I get lots of questions, or not, sorry, not questions, but I get lots of answers that are typically kind of these surface level answers. And so what I would encourage you to do is dig into the why, right? Why do you want to be rich? And when you really get down to it, most people, at least on that question, want to be rich, not because they're greedy, but because they want to help somebody, right? They want to give away that money, or they want to travel the world and learn. And I think if you spend a few minutes sitting down and writing out kind of what that future looks like, and then why that future is important to you, it's going to give you a vision and a clear path like you've never had before, and it's going to help refocus everything that you're doing now in the short term. So that is my one piece of advice: is to sit down, take 5 minutes, and write out that vision for yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Michael. Thank you all for listening, and make sure to watch out for a new episode just like this. Goodbye till then.